Hey guys. This is part 5 of What If Naruto Was Adopted by the Anbu. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 10, All In. 9 years old. Kakashi. Kakashi's head shot up and he was on his feet in an instant, zeroing in on the tired and angry-looking medic who had come for him. "What's wrong with him, Rin?" he demanded. The woman's brown eyes snapped at him in a familiar glistening rage, though it was slightly different in nature this time. She jerked her head to indicate that he should follow and stalked away, hugging the clipboard to her chest. Kakashi hurried after her. She led him to a sterile white room, and Kakashi's breath caught as he spotted Naruto on the bed, looking small and unwell. A drip slowly fed fluid into his arm, and a clip on his finger monitored his heart rate. Someone had tucked Oink into bed with him, and he was curled around the toy like he used to when he was younger. "Is he?" Kakashi couldn't finish the sentence, not even sure what he was asking. Rin shook her head, movements angry. "He's sedated. We had to pack his bed with ice to bring his fever down to a safe level, and he wasn't too happy with us." Kakashi winced a little. He didn't doubt that Naruto had thrown a huge tantrum when he'd been forced into a bed and covered with ice packs. He opened his mouth to apologize, but hesitated when he saw the way Rin was glaring at him, like he was worse than scum, like he was a convicted baby-eater. He glared back, challengingly, waiting for the shouting that they were past due for, anyway. But he'd be damned if he was drawn into the screaming before he knew what was wrong with Naruto. Fortunately, Rin was a professional as well. "That boy," she hissed, extending a finger to point at Naruto while keeping her eyes fixed on the father, "is your son. You have a responsibility to look after him, you ass." Kakashi blinked. "What the hell are you talking about?" he demanded. "What's wrong with him?" You are what's wrong." Rin stepped closer, jabbing her finger into his chest. "You did this to him." Kakashi went cold. His mind froze. "What?" he whispered. She nodded angrily, looking down at the clipboard. "No vaccinations. No checkups. He hasn't seen a GP since he was less than a year old. You and your stupid stubborn ideas have done this." "What's wrong with him?" Kakashi demanded. Rin hesitated, her face twisted in anger. "I should go straight to the Hokage and tell him that you're not fit to be a pa." Kakashi cut her off by grabbing her arms and slamming her backwards into the wall. Objects on the shelf beside her head shook, and a tube of something fell over and rolled off the edge, falling to the floor and breaking open. "Damn it, woman, tell me what is wrong with my son!" he shouted, and was angry enough to miss the flicker of fear that passed over his once teammate's face. After a moment, her own fury was enough to harden her resolve. "Bakiatari's sickness." She said the words as if they held the weight of the world. "He's got it." Kakashi's mind stalled, racing to try and place the words. Eventually, he dredged up long-lost memories from his Shotgun Academy experience, a rush lesson on the terrible disease that had erased entire clans from existence in times before the village had been founded. Bakiatari's sickness. Swift, deadly, highly contagious. But no one got it anymore. How? He actually stuttered a little, and panic gripped him. "How did he get it?" "You said, did I give it to him?" "How? I've never had it." Rin gave him the blackest look that he'd ever seen on her face, and he'd seen a few dark expressions. "Of course you've never had it," she snapped. "It's very easy to avoid contracting it in today's day and age." She turned to her clipboard and began paging through it, before finding the information she was after and reading it aloud. March 3rd, in the 39th year since Konoha's founding, Hatake Tsukumo took his son for the standard vaccinations received at 3 years of age. Among them was the vaccination for the Bakiatari sickness. You had the vaccination. Your son was never given the same opportunity. This is your fault, Hatake. Kakashi's grip on her arms eased and he stumbled back a step or two, turning to look at the child lying sick in a hospital bed. One hand came up to cover his masked mouth, and he realized for the first time what an oversight it had been to rely on Kyubi for all of the kid's medical needs. Bakiatari sickness was a disease that attacked chakra itself, consuming it until the afflicted person died, organs eventually shutting down and ceasing to function as the person's chakra levels were drained away to nothing. Such a sickness could easily topple even such indestructible forces as Jinchuriki, and had even been used as a biochemical weapon in the First Great Shinobi War. Once it had been treated by administering chakra infusions, but that was an imperfect treatment that provided nothing more than a brief reprieve anyway. There was a vaccination to guard against it, but Kakashi had never taken Naruto to receive it. Kakashi got his own vaccinations in his mandatory yearly physical, and had ever since he was 5 years old. He never thought of things like that, had never had to. But he was a parent. There was a lot of stuff that he hadn't had to think of before Naruto that he thought of, had to think of, every single day. This was his fault, a direct result of a huge oversight on his part. What's happening to him? He managed to force out through a mouth too dry to open properly. Behind him, Rin observed his reaction and felt a bit of her anger drain away. When she spoke, it was clipped and impersonal, but at least not furious anymore. Bakiatari's sickness attacks chakra. Naruto-chan appears to have quite a reservoir, so he's quite vulnerable. Which you would know if you'd spent more than 4 months in the academy. Can you help him? Rin was taken aback at how desperate that whisper was, especially in the face of her insult, and her eyes softened a little. He'll be fine. We caught it in time. I have the first dose of medication here. She dug in her white coat pocket and withdrew a syringe half full of a clear liquid. She approached the sedated child's side and reached for the drip, injecting the medicine into the thin tube and turning to squeeze the banana bag to propel it into the boy's bloodstream. He's going to be okay, but this was a damn close call. Bakiatari's sickness is enormously fast. If you had left it even until morning, it may well have been too late to save him. She paused, then held out a bit of paper to Kakashi. Sign that. I've scheduled him for all the vaccinations he's missed over the years. I need your okay. The look on her face told him clearly that he would sign his name, or have it forged. Kakashi took her pen and scrawled his name down without comment or a hint of fight, then shoved the form back at his once friend and sank down into the chair beside his child's bed. He won't wake, Rin warned him. The man shrugged, eye fixed on Naruto's face. It was quite obvious that he was planning to stay right there, unmovable as stone. She sighed and turned to leave, ready to go back to work. Thanks, Rin. The soft words reached her just as she reached the door, and she paused. For a moment, just a moment, her heart melted and a tiny bit of that warmth she'd once felt for Hatake Kakashi returned. Then she glanced back and saw him, and that horrible mission came flooding back to her, along with all the hopelessness of knowing that no matter how long she held out, no one was coming for her. She swallowed convulsively and raised her chin. I didn't do it for you, she said icily. And don't thank me yet, anyway. I'm going to the Hokage as soon as I get off tonight to demand a full investigation into you and your affairs on grounds of suspected neglect. Gods know how else you've failed that boy. With those parting words, she swept from the room. Uchiha Itachi shoved a heavy tarp aside and clambered to sit on the top of the pile of carefully stacked wood that its owner probably thought he'd hidden really well, sighing when he got there. Drawing one knee up to his chest, he wrapped an arm around it and turned already failing eyes east-northeast. Towards home. Below him, his crude and irritating partner made a noise of impatience and kicked the log pile in a poorly fashioned display of false clumsiness. Kizazumi resented having a child as a partner, and made it clear how he felt. It was fair, Itachi allowed. He resented having such a brute as his partner, but Madara had been quite insistent that he obey Pain, and Pain was a sadistic bastard. Itachi had long grown used to such annoyances, though, so the teen didn't let the man disturb him, instead sitting still as the sun went down and Kisame, grumbling and swearing and gnashing his teeth, was left to the labor of making camp and preparing something to eat all on his own. His eyes never left the horizon, as if staring in the direction of Konoha would somehow let him one day go back there. He missed his home. He missed the missions, and his teammates, and even his parents. And oh, he missed his little brother. Sasuke would be 11 now. Officially a preteen. Itachi hoped he was happier, or at least mentally more stable than the elder brother had been at that same age. Overcome with nostalgia, Itachi rested his cheek on his knee and closed his eyes for a long moment. The missing Nin was older too, time sparing no man. He'd recently turned 16, sweet 16, Kisame had mocked him, the bastard, and had shot upwards in height in the 3 years since he'd left Konoha. His features had become more refined, his face elongating to its adult proportions already. Not that he ever really noticed, or cared. Things had been eventful since his defection, to say the least. Since joining Akatsuki, he'd done basically nothing of consequence. He'd been assigned to watch for the Kyuubi. It has to re-emerge eventually, it's in the fox's nature. Though it might not turn back up again for 50 or so years. As previously stated, pain was sadistic. But Itachi knew better than to refuse to at least do a token search for the creature. The Uchiha shivered a little as he thought about the run-in he'd had as a 14-year-old with Orochimaru, the last time he'd taken his assignment as an excuse to hang around the Akatsuki's base when Kisame went out on another search for his assigned tailed demon. The creep had ambushed him in an empty corridor and spouted some gibberish that Itachi hadn't actually computed, brain stalling at the hand that had found its way to the small of his back. Within a few moments, Itachi was stalking alone and unharmed out of that corridor, having thoroughly disabused the snake bastard pedophile of the notion that young and pretty automatically equated to easy prey. Not long after, the man had decided that his life was taking him in new directions and left the organization. Itachi vaguely wondered if the man would still flinch every time he laid eyes on him even now, 2 years later. Below his dangling foot, Kisame had finally started up a fire and was loading it with heavier wood to beef it up before the flames ate through the thin sticks he'd been using to bring the sparks to life. Itachi shifted, lifted a bit of wood from the pile he'd made his seat that was digging uncomfortably into his tailbone, and tossed it with perfect accuracy into the center of the fire. A cloud of sparks and smoke flew up into Kisame's face, and the bigger man shouted expletives. Itachi smirked. Where the devil was the Kyuubi anyway? Its host had died, so it vanished. It was either dead, in which case Itachi was wasting his last few years of life on a pointless quest, or had disappeared to a different plane of existence like a summoned animal, in which case it was gathering its strength to prepare for a giant comeback, and Itachi was wasting the last few years of his life searching for a way to have a front row seat when the apocalyptic rebirth did happen and probably cut his time even shorter. Ugh, Itachi thought, swinging his folded legs so that he was straddling the pile rather than sitting on it, and leaning forward so he was lying belly down, toes pointing at the forest floor. I kinda hope Sasuke just hurries up and kills me already. This sucks. A suspicious trumpeting noise sounded from Kisame's pants, and Itachi wrinkled his nose. Ick. Anytime, Sasuke. Really. In the meantime, maybe I'll teach my partner the basics of social niceties. He dug around and came up with a handful of pointy objects in several forms. He smirked again. That idea has merit. A second later, a howl of pain split the air. A furious fight soon ensued. Itachi won. They're gonna take Naruto-chan. The hysterical cry burst from Kurenai's lips almost before she was through the door to Asuma's large apartment. The conversation inside cut off like someone switching off a radio. What? 3 voices shouted back in incredulous unison. Enko and Genma were playing a 3-way game of Go Fish with Asuma. It was only the 4 of them gathering today. Guy was on a mission. Yugogo had been confined to Anbu headquarters following an epic argument with her superiors that had resulted in the quiet woman lobbing rocks at her squad leader's head, and Hate was bedbound, defeated by a nasty version of the flu he perpetually sported. Sit down, Kurenai, and explain, Asuma ordered quickly, clearing a spot on the couch for her. She sat, picking up a pillow and hugging it to her chest. They're saying that the Hokage is gonna take Naruto-chan off Kakashi. Apparently Naruto-chan is in the hospital, and there's rumors that there was foul play involved. No way. Genma's voice was dead set sure, and he put his cards down carefully. No wucking fei. Kakashi would never hurt his kid. Nah. Wucking fei? Enko echoed, amusement in her voice. She dismissed the claim as preposterous as well. Seriously? What are you, 8? Genma colored. Shut up. Kotetsu-sen, he was guarding the Hokage's office door today. He told me that there's a claim of neglect, Kurenai said in a low voice. Asuma frowned, a sudden, tiny doubt rearing its ugly head in his mind. He forced it down. I find it hard to believe that Kakashi would mistreat Naruto in any way, Genma said, ignoring how Anko was still sniggering at his aborted cussing. Anko nodded happily, peeking at his abandoned hand of cards. Kurenai looked like she was about to cry, disbelieving at how uncaring her friends were of the situation. Asuma noticed and winced a little, putting a cautious arm around the shoulders of his crush. What happened, Kurenai? He asked. Her red eyes looked up at him thankfully, and Asuma's heart flopped just a little. Naruto-chan's sick in the hospital. When I was dropping off my mission report, Dr. Tamanaka came storming through like a thundercloud and demanded to see the Hokage. Kotetsu heard some of it, and he said that she was really mad because she was Naruto-chan's doctor, and he was in the hospital because of Kakashi's negligence. Kurenai's voice had risen to a distressed squeak by the end of that speech, but attention was taken from it by the way Genma started choking on his beer after the word doctor. Tamanaka? He echoed, bent double, holding a hand over his mouth to cough into and looking up with watering eyes. Anko banged him on the back. Tamanaka, as in Tamanaka-rin? Brown hair? Rectangles, purple tattoos on her cheeks? Yeah, Kurenai said slowly. Genma stared at her in some kind of horror. I did not know she was back in town, he exclaimed. This is bad, guys. Real bad. What? Asked Asuma. Genma gave him a scorching look. Come on, Asuma, you knew her too. She was in your class at the academy, remember? I'm the oldest of all of you, I should be the one confused here. Asuma frowned and exchanged confused looks with the girls. Yeah, I remember a Rin in my class, he said slowly. What does that have to do with? Am I the only one who sees the significance? Genma tossed himself back and covered his eyes with his hands in mock despair. Tamanaka Rin was on Kakashi's genin team, or, he was already a chunin, but she was a genin. She and Kakashi had a huge falling out, like, a decade ago, and haven't spoken to each other since. She hates his guts. More than anything. Suddenly, the relevant memories came rushing back to Asuma, and he shot upright, nearly pulling Kurenai over on the way. He remembered the little girl Rin with short brown hair and those odd tattoos, remembered working a few missions with her as a genin and then chunin during the war, and remembered her goodbye party when she was put on placement out of town. In fairness, Asuma had had little to do with her and much more to do with Uchiha Obito, who had been on the same squad. It was through Obito that Asuma had met Kakashi. Shit, he said as matter-of-factly as he was able. Genma nodded grimly at him and Anko, the youngest of the group, frowned. I don't remember her, she said bluntly. But I spent a long time out of the village as a kid. Is she really that angry, though? To take Kakashi's kid away, I mean. I don't think it would be so much pettiness, Kurenai said softly. She too now remembered why the doctor was significant. It's just. Rin-san saw Kakashi at his worst moments, then left for a long time and never saw him get better, or had a chance to be reminded of his better qualities. I didn't know that they had a fight, but if they did, it would have been huge, and those wounds fester, you know? Especially if she was once fond of him. Anko sneered. Yeah, imagine that, she spat. Girl has a crush, fights with crush, runs away like a coward for 12 years, comes back and finds that crush has moved on and now has a family, proceeds to destroy that family out of spite. Be kind, Anko, Genma scolded lightly. Rin wouldn't do that. I think what Kurenai meant to say was that she's making assumptions and decisions based on the person Kakashi was more than a decade ago. And really, would any of us have trusted Kakashi with a kid if he was still as he was back then? Remember what we all thought when he came home with Naruto-chan in the first place? The group exchanged guilty looks. It was true, they'd all individually and as a collective been fearful that iron-hided, stone-hearted Kakashi would be completely incapable of caring for a child. Of course, he'd proven them all wrong spectacularly, and there wasn't one among them that wouldn't fight for Kakashi's right to keep the kid. Asuma realized with a jolt that this was exactly the sort of situation that he had inwardly resolved to help with a little under a year ago, That day he had caught Kakashi with his Anbu gear. "We have to help," he said decisively, putting aside the tiny, damning fear that Kakashi was indeed slipping bit by bit. "We can't let them take Naruto-chan. It would destroy them both." "We don't even know what happened," Anko said reasonably, digging around in a takeout box for another stick of dango. "I mean, the Hokage is probably not gonna do anything. He'll have to investigate if the doc tells him she thinks something's up, but he'll find nothing, and do nothing. I really doubt there's any reason he'd take Naruto-chan away." "But even the investigation is crippling," Anko, Kurenai argued. "Just the fact that it happens implies a need for it to happen and puts black marks on his permanent record that'll never be erased." Asuma nodded grimly. "Add to that Kakashi's age, marital status and family history, and you have a recipe for disaster. One tiny mistake is all they need to find, a single missed meal, an afternoon when Naruto-chan was unsupervised, an injury caused by an accident that happened when Kakashi wasn't in the room, anything, to have a case for neglect. And Kakashi has a lot of enemies in high places who would love to do just that. This is a big problem." "I vote we tell Guy," Anko said wryly. "He'd go charging straight up to the hospital and start ranting about Kakashi and youth and springtime and green spandex and damn well intimidate the lady doctor into dropping the matter." A bit of breathless laughter was her reply, and she smirked, pleased with herself for lightening the mood just a little. "We have to tell him, and Hate and Yugago," Kurenai said softly. "Otherwise they'll be cross. Maybe Yugago can spread some rumors in ANBU, get some of Kakashi's old teammates to come forwards and speak for him." "That's a great idea," Asuma agreed, rubbing a hand through his hair and digging around for a cigarette in his pocket. He lit it up quickly, taking a much-needed draw of nicotine-laden smoke. "I'm slated to start another rotation in the academy tomorrow. I can talk to the teachers, maybe some parents. See if I can round up some support from that front." Every jounin had to do a certain number of hours of teaching work each year if they weren't the sensei of a genin team. This could be logged as time training chunin, tutoring genin, academy or pre-academy students to get them up to scratch, helping rookie NBU, many of whom were only chunin level when recruited, or even working in the daycare where shinobi left their children during missions. The easiest way, though, was simply to apply for a few weeks' stint at the academy. Asuma was coming up on his turn to work at the school, and had been dreading it, but it seemed it could work to his advantage. "Great," Genma said brightly, pleased with the solution. "You should talk to your father, too, Asuma. He should listen to the opinion of someone so close to Kakashi. I'll put my nose to the ground and see if I can come up with some other people of our senseis or parents' generations to speak on Kakashi's behalf." Kurenai hummed, thinking over what strings she could pull. Her parents were well-liked, with many friends in both the civilian and shinobi worlds, so she could well offer a range of support from the civilian community within Konoha. And, "Hey, isn't Kakashi friends with Hyuga Hayashi?" she asked suddenly. There was a pause. "He is?" Anko said blankly. "Since when?" Kurenai frowned. "I don't know. I've just seen them together, and Hyuga, a branch member about as old as Mom, she said that the Hataki family were invited to dinner fairly frequently." "That could certainly help," Asuma agreed, having been raised in the center of village politics and having a very keen understanding of how they worked. The Hyuga clan were well respected. If Hayashi, middle-aged head of the Hyuga clan, spoke for Kakashi, then his word would carry far more weight than a civilian-born medic in her 20s who had lived out of village for her entire adult life. The group sat there in Asuma's living room for a very long time, cards forgotten, coming up with an extensive plan to rescue their friend's family and sanity in one fell swoop. So long, in fact, that guy came to find them after his mission and was included in the plotting. By the time they split up and went their own ways, each was quietly aware that this was not the first time that Kakashi had needed help, would not be the last, and that each of them willingly, gladly was taking up the mantle of friend and protector to the man and his child, whether Kakashi agreed to it or not. Kiba was feeling a horrible dread coiling slowly in his stomach as the day progressed. He felt like he was going to throw up all over his exam paper. He was going to do it. He just knew it. He was in the midst of the first of 3 graduation exams that were offered in the last 18 months of the academy. Potential graduates had 3 chances, 3 exams, to show off their skills. They had to pass at least one, preferably 2 of these exams to avoid repeating their final year. Everyone had been really nervous about the exams, desperate to do well right off the bat. Naruto wasn't there. And Kiba was afraid that it was his fault. 4 days ago, everything had been normal. Sure, Naruto had been a little quieter than his average, but he had days when that happened, so Kiba hadn't thought much of it. The Inuzuka was in a hurry to get home after school, because his sister had made a huge chocolate cake yesterday, and had promised to ice it while he was at school and let him have a bit when he got home that day. So he didn't stay with Naruto until the kid's father had turned up, and had barely thought to offer for him to come to the Inuzuka compound with Kiba. Naruto was 9, Kiba had reckoned when Naruto had asked to wait for his father for a little while longer, so he'd be fine by himself until Kakashi-san turned up. So he'd shouted goodbye and left at a run, deaf to Naruto's protests. Naruto wasn't at school the next day. Kiba had noticed, and felt vaguely uneasy, but brushed the feeling aside. Naruto was out of school as often as he was in it, with no warning. His dad probably took him on another trip. But then the next day, another day with no Naruto, Kiba had spotted Kakashi-san, looking pinched and worn and worried, talking to a grim-faced Iruka-sensei after school, and his heart had frozen over in terror. What if Naruto was missing? What if someone had come and taken him from school, all because Kiba was too impatient to stay with him for a few minutes? He remembered overhearing his mother ranting about Naruto being abducted once already, which was why he was allowed to have live kunai on him all the time in school now. What if it happened again? What if someone had Naruto? What if they'd hurt him? What if he was dead? What if it was all Kiba's fault? Akamaru whined anxiously at him, and Kiba looked down at the tiny puppy. "I know, boy, but what am I supposed to do?" he whispered desperately. Iruka-sensei obviously heard, because his head rose and his eyes locked on the Inuzuka. "Kiba-kun, please stay quiet," he called mildly. "Test conditions, no talking." Despite the fact that the words were barely a rebuke, they triggered something that had not happened, especially in public, for many years. Kiba began to cry. Iruka's eyes widened. That was not the normal reaction of anyone being reminded they were working a test, and he quickly made his way to the boy's desk. "Hey, what's wrong?" he said, voice low to match the near-silent sobs racking the little boy's frame. With someone as small as Naruto in the class, it was easy to forget that this outgoing child was still very young as well. The teacher glanced at the test paper. Only a couple of answers were scratched in, the rest glaringly blank. "Are you having trouble? Don't worry, Kiba-kun. Take a deep breath. You're a good student, okay? You can do this." Kiba shook his head, tears streaming down his face, and pointed at Naruto's empty chair. "It's my fault," he half-wailed. Other students were looking up from their own tests, curious. Iruka glanced around and winced a little. "Mizuki-sensei," he said to get the assistant's attention. When the silver-haired man looked up, Iruka gestured at the sobbing Kiba and then nodded at the door. Mizuki understood and nodded back, settling differently in his chair to watch the students more carefully, ready to supervise. Meanwhile, Iruka put a hand on Kiba's shoulder, gently but firmly insisting that the boy move. "Come on, Kiba, let's go outside and talk about this. Up you get, good boy. We don't want to disturb the others from their test." The quiet monologue coaxed Kiba out the door, which Iruka shut behind them. He heard Mizuki say a harsh, "Get back to your tests, kids. Chuji, put that cookie down and do your test," but ignored the dispute, trusting the other teacher to handle the class for a time. Iruka steered his weeping charge down the corridor and into the teacher's lounge, which was empty for once. "Okay." He knelt in front of Kiba. "Tell me what's wrong. What's your fault?" Kiba's brown eyes looked at him fearfully, his lower lip trembling. "I'm sorry!" he wailed. I'm sorry, I should have waited but I didn't and now he's gone and I'm sorry." Whoa, Iruka spoke over the noise. "Tell me what happened." Gradually, in bits and pieces interspersed by tears, the teacher got the full story. Iruka had to bite the inside of his cheek to keep from lashing out with angry words upon finding out that Kiba had left the Hataki child alone. Iruka himself had left early that day to get to an appointment on time, and hadn't seen the children off safely, so most of the shocked anger was at himself anyway, and Kakashi-san would kill him if this got out. Taking a deep breath, the teacher put aside the irrational fear and anger, and sat down on one of the couches in the staff room, gesturing for Kiba to sit next to him. "Kiba-kun," he began, choosing his words carefully, "Naruto-kun is not missing. He is in the hospital." Kiba gasped in horror, wide-eyed and terrified, almost convinced that he was going to be arrested or at the very least exiled for his heinous crime of leaving Naruto in the academy school grounds after school finished. Iruka recognized, and had to swallow a smile. He became ill, and his father took him there in the middle of the night following the last day he was in school. "This wasn't your fault. He contracted a sickness that got very bad very quickly, but he's going to be fine, just fine. He'll be back before you know it. Here." He offered a box of tissues. Kiba took 3, and set about mopping up his face. "Is he really okay?" he half-whispered. Iruka hesitated, then simply nodded rather than going into specifics with the boy. "He will be," he agreed. "Can I visit him?" the Inuzuka blurted. His teacher winced just slightly. Naruto was infected with an often deadly, highly contagious disease, and used the ultimate in adult deflections. "You'd have to ask your mother. Are you okay now?" Kiba nodded, still sniffling a little but well on his way back to composed. Iruka sat there with him for a little longer until the child was calm, then led him to the bathroom to wash his face off, and back to his waiting exam. Mizuki looked in askance at him as he settled beside his co-teacher at the front of the room, and Iruka rolled his eyes. "Children are so dramatic," he whispered to his partner. Mizuki laughed quietly in agreement. Inuzuka-tsum was glaring at her daughter's favorite blouse, which she had accidentally put a hole in with a bit of over-vigorous hand-washing. "What kind of shirt is hand-wash only in this day and age?" she demanded of the garment. It didn't respond, or magically mend itself. Tsum growled low in her throat and glared some more, redirecting the look to her familiar when the big dog chuckled. "You be quiet. You should have let Seiji-chan do your laundry, Tsum," he replied chidingly. "You're not cut out for housework. It's time to face it. Your elder brother is better at it than you are." "I don't need help to run my own household," Tsum shouted, then looked at the shirt again. "I just need to mend this before Hana gets home." "Easy." Koromaru blanched. "Please don't try to sew. Please. Give it to your cousin. Please, Tsum." Tsum studiously ignored the canine, threading a needle carefully and holding up the shirt again, unsure where to begin. The watching dog cringed in anticipation of the mangled mess that Hana's shirt was soon to become. "Where did you even find a sewing needle?" he demanded. "It was stuck between the couch cushions," Tsum said with a touch of pride. Koromaru groaned. "Seiji-chan is good with repairs," he said hopefully. "She can fix things like you'll never know they were torn." Tsum opened her mouth to snarl at the animal something to the tune of "I can clothe my own kids, damn it," but shut it again when a soft knock on the door interrupted her. "Enter?" she said, curious. She wasn't expecting visitors, and anyone in her clan would bounce in without knocking. The door opened, and Tsum just about had a heart attack when it revealed the knocker to be none other than Hyuga's very own clan head, Hayashi. The king of protocol and manners, and not turning up without warning or invitation, and sticks up arses. "Hayashi? Who's dead?" she blurted, jumping to her feet in alarm. The Hyuga looked grim, but smirked a tiny bit at her reaction. "No one," he said evenly. "I apologize for coming over unannounced like this, but a matter has been brought to my attention that needs instant response, and I was hoping that you might be able to help me with it." Tsum blinked. That was something that she'd never thought she would hear out of the stone-cold Hyuga's lips. "You feeling all right, Hayashi?" The man gave her a wry look, and she grinned. "Sure, I'll help. What's the problem? Must be important." Hayashi nodded, a single slash of his head, and gestured for Tsum to follow. She stood and held the blouse out to Koromaru. "Take that to Seiji-chan, ask her to mend it," she ordered. Koromaru wisely obeyed without comment. I have heard rumors that I feel are based rather solidly in fact, and I fear I may need your assistance in diverting what could be a domino effect that could have devastating consequences. Now Tsum was getting concerned as she followed the Hyuga out of her home and clan's complex, into the village proper. They appeared to be headed for the Hokage Tower. What's up? Do you recall a young medic by the name of Tamanaka Rin? Hayashi inquired. Tsum thought on the name, searching memory banks and coming up empty. Nope, she said, shaking her head. Should I? Hayashi's lips curved in a cultured smile. Hardly. I couldn't place the name either until I searched for her personnel file. Her sealed, confidential personnel file, Tsum added. Hayashi waved a hand, dismissing the technicality. Just so. It seems that she has a grudge against Hataki-san. Hayashi paused and turned back as Tsum stopped dead, falling behind. Problem? Naruto? She said. This is about Naruto? Hayashi tilted his head. It's about Kakashi-san. But Rin has accused him of neglecting Naruto-kun, yes. I need you to come and stand beside me while I explain to the Hokage how ludicrous the claim is, and persuade him not to investigate the matter. Tsum nodded, and they kept moving together through the crowded streets. Hayashi spoke quickly as they wove through people in the shopping district, filling the Inuzuka in on the situation as he understood it. Tsum was horrified. She had, of course, heard that Naruto was ill, and had even gone so far as to send Kakashi a meal or two to carry him through the trial that was a hospitalized child, but to be accused of neglect? Cold fingers wrapped themselves around her heart as she thought of what an investigation would result in, and she took a moment to truly hate the iron-fisted militant rule they lived under that would confiscate Kakashi's most precious person like stolen goods. Then she felt horror wash over her as she contemplated the bloodbath that would be Kakashi's reaction to someone attempting to forcibly take his child. It would be a massacre, and Kakashi would be killed at the end of it all, and Naruto would still be without him. So, as you are no doubt aware, I was hoping to use our joint influence to forestall or stop the investigation before it is ordered, Hayashi wrapped up. I understand you are fond of Kakashi-san. I am aware that you have offered aid often over the last 9 years. Tsum snorted and nodded. Yeah. Kid needed a bit of a hand along the line, you know? Needed a mum, actually. Ridiculous, right? But I had time, and money enough not to miss a donated meal, or some clothing or some manual labor here and there. A nasty thought occurred to her, and she narrowed her eyes at her companion. But what about you? Why do you care? You're not the sort to do this out of the goodness of your heart. What's your angle? What do you get from speaking for him like this? Hayashi stopped dead and turned to face her. Tsum was taken aback by the cold anger lighting up his eyes. Hataki Kakashi is the only man in this entire village who has the slightest idea of the challenges my family has faced, he snarled. We are more alike than I care to examine, and a shared interest in keeping our children safe from Kumo is the least of it. He is my strongest supporter, my most outspoken advocate in my vendetta against that accursed place, and I am his. I will not stand by and watch yet another party attempt to steal his child. Not so long as you need him, eh? Tsum said shrewdly. Hayashi snorted. You think little of me, Inuzuka-san. That is your business. All that you should concern yourself with, however, is that at this time I have nothing but the best of intentions for both the Hataki children. He spun and stalked off, resuming his path towards the Hokage's dwelling. Tsum winced behind him and hurried to catch up. Ma, Kakashi is young, isn't he? She said when she was once again level with Hayashi, her voice and mood having swung back from anger and into goodwill. Barely 25, just a baby, really. Poor kid. He's had rotten luck with that brat of his from day one. So you intend to speak with me on his behalf? Hayashi's monotone was back. Tsum glared at him and jabbed him in the side with her finger, causing him to squeak in a most un-Hayashi-like manner and jump about a foot before turning and glaring at her. Just try and stop me, Hyuga, she said stoutly, stamping ahead and leaving Hayashi staring at her back in disbelief at her childishness. The incredulousness only increased when she gave a shout and veered off course, dodging into a restaurant as she passed by the door. Hayashi followed, ducking his head under the flaps of material hanging at head height in the otherwise empty doorway to look for whatever it was that had sidetracked Sim so completely. She had stopped beside a gathering of 4 men who appeared to be sharing a meal. Yamanaka Inoichi, Akamichi Chuza, Abirame Shibi, and Nara Shikaku were gathered around the table, all of them partway through a meal and all of them looking up at Sim in surprise. "Fall in line, boys," the wild woman was saying, hands on her hips. "I'm in need of your muscle. Just stand there, look intimidating, and don't talk. Come on." Hayashi was expecting haughty refusals. Heavens knew he'd respond that way, but was surprised when the 4 clan heads merely stood quietly, Chuza lifting a rice ball to take along with him and Inoichi throwing a cheeky salute at Sim along with a "yes, ma'am." Shikaku dragged his feet and moaned about how troublesome the whole ordeal was, but didn't make any move to stay and finish eating, and Shibi just fell silently in line, content to do as he was told. It was surreal to Hayashi, but not an altogether unfortunate turn of events. Their presence would be a great advantage in the negotiations to come. No one spoke as they made their collective way to the Hokage Tower. The newcomers didn't even question where they were going. Hayashi explained their mission briefly to the secretarial staff at the base of the Hokage Tower, and they were informed that Sarutobi was meeting with Tamanaka at that very moment. Perfect timing, Sim grinned, all fong, and led the way to the office. "Sim-san," Hayashi said as they drew near, "please allow me to do the talking on this occasion. I feel I am better suited to." Yeah, your show." "Fine," Sim interrupted, shoving the Chunin guard aside and opening the Hokage's door. Inside, the Hokage was gravely listening to a young woman. Sim rightly assumed her to be Dr. Tamanaka. The Inuzuka felt a growl begin in the back of her throat at the sight of the little upstart who was making waves. "I first came here 2 days ago, Hokage-sama. Why haven't you ordered an inquiry yet?" Tamanaka was saying. "Rin-san," the Hokage replied, "I was rather hoping to wait a little, and let all parties calm down. I know there is tension between yourself and Kakashi-san, so maybe it would be best to start this off unofficially?" "I know what I know, Hokage-sama," and I really think Rin began to reply heatedly, but Sim chose that moment to draw attention to her presence. "Oh, come on, Hokage-sama," she scoffed, striding forwards. "The kid got the sniffles. That is not a case for neglect. If it was, there'd be no parent anywhere allowed to keep their kids. Hell, mine've been sick more often than I can count." Hayashi gave her a look, and she sighed and nodded, consenting to be quiet and let the diplomatic Hyuga talk his way around this. "Hello, Sim-san," Sarutobi said, sounding surprised and more than a little amused. "Hayashi-san, Inoichi-san, Chuza-san, Shibi-san, Shikaku-san." "The problem is not that he got the sniffles," Rin snapped, ire raised, ignoring the greetings and speaking directly to Sim. "He caught a rare and often deadly, not to mention highly contagious disease, as a direct result of his father neglecting to get him his vaccinations." The gathering of middle-aged shinobi were quiet after the outburst, causing the anger in Rin's voice to fall oddly flat in the echoing silence that followed. After a reasonable pause, Hayashi cleared his throat and spoke softly. "Can you prove that the child only contracted the Bakiatari sickness as a direct result of the absence of vaccinations?" he asked quietly. The young woman stared at him. "The vaccination safeguards against contracting the disease," she half-shouted. "Always," Hayashi returned, his voice becoming quieter as Rin's got louder. "There is never a case where a vaccinated person has contracted the illness that he or she has been vaccinated against." Color clouded Rin's cheeks, and she looked away. "Sometimes, after several decades, people can contract diseases they have been vaccinated against," she admitted. Hayashi nodded patiently. "And did the fact that Kakashi-san did not vaccinate Naruto-kun guarantee that he would contract the Bakiatari sickness?" "Well, of course not, but it highly increased the chances." "From what to what, exactly? 1 in 100 to 2 in 100? To 10 in 100? What are the chances of catching Bakiatari sickness here, in Konoha?" "Practically nothing, but—" "Practically nothing, especially when one factors his Naruto-kun's preternatural ability to remain healthy, yes? It's true that Hatake Naruto-kun allegedly never gets sick, but—" And when he noticed that Naruto-kun was ill, Kakashi-san took him straight to the hospital, to the care of a medic he knew would be able to recognize and treat the illness, despite it being the middle of the night. In fact, he acted within an ideal time frame, was an excellent example of how one should react when faced with such a situation, correct? Idly, some wondered how Hayashi had gotten that information, or if he was just making a series of educated guesses based on what he knew of Kakashi and Kakashi's mother-hen tendencies. Rin looked frustrated. Well, he did, but… So, to summarize, Hayashi interrupted ruthlessly, Kakashi-san chose to forego a medical procedure that may not have worked and may have been unnecessary anyway due to Naruto-kun's maternal inheritance, an action which only marginally increased Naruto-kun's chances of contracting the illness, and acted in a responsible and timely manner upon finding his child to be ill. This is the evidence that Tamanaka-san wishes to present to Hokage-sama as reason for a full inquiry into the Hatake family, under suspicion of neglect. Finally, Hayashi turned back to the Hokage. Honestly, Hokage-sama, do I really need to explain why Inuzuka-sama, Yamanaka-sama, Aburame-sama, Nara-sama, Akamichi-sama and myself are protesting this claim? The Hokage sighed and looked past the Hyuga to Rin. He does have a point, Rin-san, he said, spreading his hands. Do you have anything to add? Rin made a frustrated noise. Sir, she protested, it's not as simple as Hyuga-sama makes out. I'm sure the vaccinations are just the tip of the iceberg, and everyone knows that Kakashi is not a suitable person for a parent. He's just not. Oh, well then, some spoke up again, unable to keep quiet. Forgive us if we don't convict Hatake on the overwhelming evidence that everyone knows it's true. There is actually a great amount of evidence to contradict that statement, anyway, Hayashi pointed out softly. Given an entire council of the clan stands before you, advocating Kakashi-san's innocence and worth as a parent. Sarutobi held up his hands. Enough, he said. Turning to Rin, he said, Rin-san, I understand your concern. It does seem that Kakashi has made a grave error in neglecting to procure proper medical upkeep for his son. However, he paused for a long moment, glancing at the gathered clan heads. Hyuga-san does have a point. Given the circumstances, especially given Kakashi-san's track record with regards to Naruto-kun, no vaccinations just doesn't constitute a case for neglect. I understand that you have concerns, but unless you can provide real medical evidence that any kind of abuse has taken place, I don't see the reason to order a full investigation. You can't be serious, Rin exclaimed. Hokage-sama, Kakashi is bad news. He… You shut your mouth, girl, growled Sam, cutting off the accusations as a surge of anger hit and stepping forwards aggressively. I've watched that boy since he first came home with that baby, and he's done nothing but his best for the brat. And here you come waltzing back to the village thinking you know him better than anyone. I got news for you, he grew up. He changed. He loves that kid more than the air he breathes, and if you think you're gonna take that away from him… Sim-san, Hayashi intervened, laying a hand on his comrade's shoulder. Calm yourself. The Hokage has made his decision. Tamanaka-san's words are now just the senseless raging of a jilted woman. Do not concern yourself too much with them. Rin's face colored and her mouth twisted with anger, but she didn't speak. Hayashi nodded at her in mocking farewell and herded his group out the door and back to street level, sensing that the best thing to do now was to retreat before the doctor could actually gather herself enough to form a proper argument. Well, that was interesting, Inoichi said mildly as they stepped back out to the bright sunlight. Sam shot him a sharp-toothed grin. Thanks, guys. Good job. Y'all did just like you were told. You did good, all intimidating and supportive-like and silent. Ma, troublesome, complained Shikaku, raking fingers through his hair and looking up at the sun. You made me late, Sam. How am I gonna explain this to my wife? Don't be a drama queen, Inoichi grinned. Glad I could help, Chusa said to Tsum with a gentle smile. What a silly reason to justify taking someone's child away. My Chuji has nothing but good things to say about little Naruto-chan. The boy couldn't be being abused. It's not possible. Be careful, Shibi intoned from behind his high collar and sunglasses. Shino tells me the child becomes quite distressed if one uses chan as a suffix connected to his name. Tsum laughed. Well, what he don't know won't hurt the runt, I gotta go, stuff to do. Thanks for comin', men. Hayashi, good catch there. She took off, leaving a confused-looking Hyuga in her wake. He turned to his fellow clan heads for help. Inoichi grinned at him. She means spotting the whole investigating neglect thing. Well done. One by one, the others all congratulated him. Even Shikaka dredged up a troublesome that sounded vaguely appraising. Hayashi was left with the peculiar feeling of not only being one of a group, but being accepted and liked within that group. He found that he liked the feeling. Rin! Wait up! Surprised, Rin turned. She was shocked when she saw that it was her once teammate who had called after her. She was all but at the village gates, leaving for another placement at another tiny outpost for another 5 years. No one had come to see her off, and she had told no one that she was leaving. And yet there was Kakashi, moving quickly to catch up, hand in hand with the small blonde child that Rin despaired of him having. What? She asked tiredly, bracing herself for anger, for the spitting rage that she was sure would pour onto her from Kakashi. Heavens knew he had a temper, and didn't let things go. How angry had he been at Obito over every tiny slight? And hers was a huge one. She'd be lucky to leave unscathed, really. So she closed her eyes and waited for the first blow. I meant to be waiting for you at the gate, came Kakashi's voice, actually sounding apologetic. But, well, I ran late. Rin's eyes flew open and she stared at the man in surprise. His hand was rubbing the back of his head and his face was crinkled in an awkward smile the likes of which Rin wouldn't have thought him capable of creating. What do you want, Kakashi? She asked tiredly. Kakashi dropped his hand and looked at her. You were leaving again. Without saying goodbye. Again. The words weren't accusatory, but Rin bristled anyway. I wouldn't have thought you'd care. She spat. You hate goodbyes. Kakashi nodded, and again Rin was taken aback in the ease in the motion, the gentleness that she hadn't seen before. She wondered wildly if this was even Kakashi, or if someone was teasing her with a henge. I wanted to say thanks. For helping Narupup. And I guess I should introduce you properly, eh? Again, that awkward smile turned up, and Rin just stared beyond words. Kakashi pulled on the hand still holding his child's, drawing Naruto in front of him. Rin, this is my son Naruto. Naruto, this is Dr. Tamanaka Rin. She was on my genin team when I was your age, and she was the doctor who looked after you in the hospital. The little boy, who looked achingly familiar in a way that Rin couldn't place, smiled up at her happily. Thanks for looking after me, Dr. Rin, he said sunnily. I feel loads better now. I'm glad, Naruto-kun, Rin said faintly, seeing that she had to say something. Kakashi dropped Naruto's hand and bent forwards to murmur something in his ear, and Naruto nodded and wandered away, finding a nearby tree and proceeding to scale it. Kakashi had clearly told him something to the tune of don't wander far, but you can play if you want. Well, you win, Rin said a touch bitterly as she watched the child and ruefully admitted, in her own mind, to herself and herself alone, that Naruto didn't appear to be at all cowed or wanting. I suppose you've come to tell me I told you so. Nah. 10 years ago, you'd been right on the money, Kakashi said easily, sticking his hands in his pockets. Rin stared. Where was her stiff, proper, punctual teammate? What had happened to him? Could people really change so completely? Well, I have to go. Bye. Retreat, that was all she could do. Before he hurt her again, before he realized that despite 10 years of building defenses designed to keep him out, he was so very able to hurt her deeply with a word, a look, a gesture. She turned and all but fled. Rin. As if the word had been a net that caught and held her, Rin stopped, but she didn't turn back. She tensed, waiting for the attack, but Kakashi's next words caught her totally off guard. I am sorry. The woman drew in a quick gasp of air, then gathered herself and half-turned, taking in the man standing there looking truly repentant, and not in the least like he was mocking her. Something softened inside her for once at the sight. I know, she said, and meant it. She struggled with the idea of forgiveness, but found she couldn't, not just yet. But perhaps soon, given time to let out the badness that had festered in that horrible wound she had worn on her heart like a shield. Kakashi bowed his head, as if he had read her thoughts and accepted her answer. Hey, Rin found herself saying, and hesitated again when her teammate's soul eye locked on her. If you're ever in town, she began, then shrugged. Look me up. It was Kakashi's turn to blink in surprise, but he recovered quickly, and for the first time in 11 years, the pair shared a smile. Chapter 11, Clipping Wings. 10 years old. Kakashi took a deep breath, one hand patting down the front of his vest as if searching for something in something of a nervous tic. Then, when he had gathered himself, he moved into the large, red building in front of him. Today he had a meeting with the council. He was already 20 minutes late, but he had a good excuse prepared, one involving fire and a tree and oink and a daring rescue. And if it was slightly embellished, well, it should amuse the old folks, regardless. Or irritate them into a blind rage. 50-50 chance, really? Kakashi strolled into the plush, over-furnished room the council liked to convene in, making an effort to look completely unhurried. The council was already assembled, Mitokado Hamura and Yuditane Koharu, equally old and equally disapproving. Iruka was standing off to one side, holding a bunch of papers and looking awkward. Hataki-san, Koharu started in. You're late. Forgive me, Yuditane-san, Kakashi replied, choosing not to mention his wonderful excuse. Maybe he'd tell it to Naruto when he relayed this meeting over dinner tonight. The woman's eyes narrowed at his chosen suffix for her name, but in all technicality he was a clan head, and could be as informal with her as she was with him. By calling him San, she technically invited him to replace Sama with San when addressing her as well. Technically. Since Kakashi was the leader of a clan with an official total head count of 2, he was by and large unnoticed when it came to matters of the clans. He wasn't invited to clan head meetings, but could technically insist upon a seat within them. He was treated as a regular shinobi, but technically, he stood on the same social ranking as the council members themselves, along with every other clan head in the village. Most of the time, this fact was purposely disregarded by the council. Most of the time, he let them. Today, the Hokage had suggested he use his title to push through a tiny snag that had caught his ankle in his endeavor to raise Naruto. Shall we get down to business, then? Hamura said. He didn't invite Kakashi to sit, but the Hataki did so anyway, choosing a pillow and settling himself casually. Fine by me, Kakashi said. It's about Naruto, isn't it? There is a matter we must discuss concerning your son's schooling, Koharu said stiffly. Kakashi looked at her. His schooling? I was under the impression he was in the class that would be graduating next week. Yes, that is the issue, Hamura said crisply. Your child is 10 years of age, and so is forbidden to graduate by the decrees passed by Sandaime-sama 5 years ago regarding early graduation. Kakashi blinked, unpacking that sentence. That decree states that no child can be caused to graduate before he or she has completed 6 years of formal schooling, he admitted. But Naruto-kun is ready to graduate, so I am asking you to waive that rule. And why should we? Sniffed Koharu. Kakashi looked at Iruka. Iruka jumped. Oh. Right, he said into the silence, realizing he was late on his cue. Well, I have here Naruto's scholastic record. He's a model student, despite frequent absences, and is one of the top-ranking students in the class. He's currently the strongest competition for Uchiha Sasuke, who is widely regarded as a genius. Do you have a point, sensei? Asked Hamura, impatient. Iruka frowned at him, understanding the way he said the word sensei was actually an insult. It is my opinion as Naruto-kun's schoolteacher that he is more than ready to graduate. You are certain? Hamura questioned. As ready as Sasuke-kun, Iruka said lightly. Thank you, sensei, you may go, Koharu said, voice clipped. Iruka bowed a little and left. So? My son is ready to graduate. Kakashi spoke the words as a prompt. Really, it was an open and shut case, and he still had his ace in the hole. Be that as it may, the decree is quite clear. 6 years of formal training, I know, Kakashi spoke over the old person's prepared stuffy speech. But he has had 6 years of training. I taught him formally for 4 years prior to his entering the academy. So don't let that worry you. The council frowned at him in annoyed unison, and Kakashi wondered vaguely why they were being so stubborn on this one issue. Maybe they were just contrary by nature. Even so, we cannot in good conscience allow a 10-year-old to graduate, Koharu said authoritatively. Movement made all three look around. The Hokage had entered the room at some point and was now walking forwards. I noticed Iruka-sensei and thought I'd put my head in, he said by way of explanation. Then, to Koharu, I appreciate you holding true to the nature of my decree, my friend, but I think this is a special case. Kakashi-san's child will be given leeway in this. Hokage-sama, Hamura began to protest, but a look from his leader made him quieten. Kakashi carefully kept his face blank, but inwardly he was relieved. It had been Sarutobi's idea to put the kid's name forth for early graduation in the first place, and it seemed that Sarutobi was now stepping in to force it through. No, I have made my decision, the Hokage said. Should Hatake Naruto pass his examination, he shall graduate with his class. The room was silent, the smell of sweat and paper subtle but present under the harsh glow of artificial lighting. Iruka and Mizuki were policing the examination, stalking up and down rows to search for cheaters. This was it. Final exam day. Naruto was seated in the 4th row, 6th column. His exam paper was in front of him, and he was writing steadily, intent on finishing every answer to the best of his abilities. To his relief, all the content seemed to be within his capabilities. Suddenly those hundreds of hours his father had used to pound all that theory into his brain seemed justified, and Naruto's pencil moved quickly to shape the kanji he needed to answer each question. He finished roughly half a minute before Iruka-sensei called time, and sighed with relief. That was one hurdle down. Mizuki gathered up the test papers, looking absolutely thrilled with the knowledge that he had to mark all of these within the next hour so the failures could be sent home and the passes could proceed to the practical portion of the exam. Exam days were the stuff of nightmares for the academy staff. The kids were ushered outside to play and have lunch. Naruto could be seen forcing himself as high as he was able to go on the swing, while Kiba chased Akamaru in circles and Chuji joined Shikamaru for a nap. Inside, Iruka, Mizuki, Akemi, Ryo and Yoko split the exam papers between them and began to mark. When they were done, Iruka went to read the list of names of passing students, and just over half the combined class trickled back in. The group was made up of Iruka-sensei's class and Ryo-sensei's failures from last year, back for another try. Most of the older children made it through, Iruka noted idly as Mizuki barked orders for silence, and explained how the practical exam was going to be structured. More interestingly, the youngest member of the class had passed, too, with flying colors. Hatake Naruto was ready to graduate, Iruka mused to himself. And if he did well in the practical exam, he would. Soon, it was Naruto's turn to take his 1-on-2 test. He crept into the room where Iruka and Mizuki were sitting, face pale but determined, and took his place in front of their desk. Naruto-kun, please show us a kawarimi, Mizuki started without preamble, already beyond ready for the day to be over with. The Hatake swallowed, nodded, and made his hand signs. Kawarimi no jutsu, he said softly, and a moment later was on the other side of the room, a tall lamp wobbling where he had been standing a second ago. Iruka was impressed. Kawarimi with an object with such a significantly smaller mass than Naruto was difficult. Henge, Mizuki said, nursing his head in his hand, eyes closed. He obviously had a headache, but Iruka felt a flash of annoyance at how he completely disregarded the student trying to impress him. Naruto looked anxious at his teacher's tone and posture, and ran back to the center of the room. Henge no jutsu, he said, and a cloud of smoke. Later Hatake Kakashi slouched in the middle of the room. Iruka looked him over, searching for inconsistencies. He didn't spot any, but... Naruto-kun, please choose someone other than your father, he said. Naruto reappeared, swallowed, then made his hand gestures and turned into Iruka, then the Hokage, then Kiba, and finally a small dog with a squashed nose. Iruka smiled. Well done. Yep, let's move on, Mizuki added, watching through his fingers. Bunshin, and we'll be done. Naruto turned back into himself and hesitated. Iruka sat up straighter. Naruto had struggled the most with this jutsu, he knew. But the Hatake didn't balk too badly, just taking a few deep breaths before pulling his hands up in a peculiar hand seal and saying, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 8 Narutos appeared in the room. Iruka frowned. Are Kage Bunshin allowed? He asked in an undertone, turning so that Mizuki would catch the words but Naruto wouldn't. Mizuki hummed. We may as well pass him. He's got 3 or more clones there. What does it matter if they're regular, water, mud or shadow ones? Remember that kid we had, like, the year before last? Uharu Hattori? He made us a water clone. After he made a regular one, Iruka countered. Mizuki groaned and dropped his head into his hands. Oh, whatever. He's done well, sensei. I think we should just pass him. A clone is a clone. Iruka still hesitated, but his assistant had a point. Okay. Turning back to face the fidgeting student, he smiled. Well done, Naruto-kun. You've passed. Congratulations. Naruto lit up, his whole body brightening like a tiny sun. Really? Yes. Here. Iruka held out a Hittite, and Naruto bounced forwards to retrieve it. Thank you. You're welcome, Naruto-kun. You earned it, Iruka smiled. Mizuki made an indistinct noise from his place face down on the desk. Next? He called a moment later, and Naruto took that as his cue to bolt, clutching his headband. The classroom was still crowded when he barreled back into it. Kiba looked up instantly. Kid! Status! I passed. Yes. In a moment, Kiba was up and jumping on the desk, helping Naruto celebrate. Naruto was laughing, more relieved and bubbly than he'd have thought possible. Akemi-sensei came to make them stop climbing on furniture, and Naruto toyed with the idea of going home. A moment later, he resolved to somehow sit still until Kiba had taken his test, and then celebrate together some more. Oh, Kakashi, sang a chunin when said Jounin walked into the missions room that morning. Kakashi froze, looking at the chunin stacked high with purple scrolls in mild horror. No, he said. Yes, the chunin replied, holding out one of the scrolls. Was there any color more evil than purple? If there was, Kakashi had yet to see it. Are you certain it's for me? He asked, almost desperately. Positive, the chunin said happily. Enjoy. So Kakashi was left holding the scroll, looking at it as if he was debating if it would clog up the toilet if he flushed it down. You got one too, huh? Said a glum voice, and Kakashi looked up. Asuma was standing there, examining his own purple scroll that the far too cheerful chunin had given to him with the air of a Santa handing out presents to orphaned children on Christmas Day. Kakashi nodded, and watched as Asuma opened his scroll, eyes squeezed shut to protect himself for as long as possible. The Hitaki grinned as he cracked open one eye a fraction, and groaned loudly. What did you get? Kakashi asked. Asuma was moaning in mock agony, and held out the scroll so that his friend could see. The latest in the Ino Shikucho saga, he whined. I'll never be allowed to flunk that lot. It's not fair. Kakashi did laugh at that, Asuma's misfortune making his own more bearable. Still, he wondered which of Naruto's classmates he'd be left with, and cringed at the thought of teaching any of them. He tucked his scroll away in a pocket, thinking to examine it later, with some alcohol on board to help him deal with the trauma. Maybe after Naruto was in bed. Oh! Kurenai's got one this year. Asuma yelped, and Kakashi glanced around. Yes, Kurenai was shyly accepting a purple scroll from the chunin, a delighted flush gracing her pretty face and an ecstatic expression lighting up her eyes. Kakashi waved a hand, catching her attention, and the newest jounin practically danced across the missions room to join them. I've been assigned a genin team, she gushed the moment she was close enough. I've been assigned a genin team. The men smiled for her, aware of how important this landmark was for most jounin. It meant that the Hokage had deemed them ready to be trusted training the next generation. It was a huge honor. Of course, Asuma was the Sandame's son and had always been assured of his father's love, and had been assigned genin teams as a way of keeping him out of trouble. Kakashi had been in Anbu, so teaching seemed a little less of a huge responsibility. For Kurenai, this meant the world. Just be sure you're not too easy on them, Asuma was cautioning. Don't let your delight blind you when it comes to the kids. Hokage-sama will most likely give you a team next year if you don't pass them this year. Kurenai nodded, accepting the advice but too busy riding the high of her achievement to really notice it. Excitedly, she unfurled the scroll to see the names of the children she would be taking command of. Inuzuka Kiba, Hyuga Hinata and Aburame Shino! She exclaimed. Kakashi made a noise. Kiba-kun is Narapup's friend, he offered. Nice kid, but a bit enthusiastic. Hinata-chan is sweet but really shy. You'll be a good role model for her, I think. You know them? Kurenai latched onto him like he'd offered her the meaning of life. Kakashi took a step backwards, a little surprised by her intensity, and gave a nervous little laugh. Yeah? Kiba is Tsum's kid, Hinata is Hayashi's. Hayashi is always going on about his kids when he starts talking, so I know most of what I know about Hinata-chan from him. She's totally timid, and has huge inferiority issues. Kiba-kun is, well, he's got a thick head, but he's certainly not lacking in the confidence department. And Shino-kun? What's he like? Kurenai demanded. Kakashi tried. He really did. He knew he met the kid before, just like he'd met Shino's father, but try as he might he couldn't recall what the boy was like. He's forgettable, he said honestly, and ducked a reactive, indignant swipe. You'll have to find out for yourself, he added, nodding sagely as he stepped back out of range. Asuma laughed. So who did you get, Kakashi? He prompted. I got Inoshikacho. Kurenai got a group of trackers. What did you get? Kurenai stopped obsessively rereading her scroll to look at him as well. Yes, tell us. Then, as something else computed, Inoshikacho? Ouch, Asuma. I know, Asuma said ruefully. Then the pair turned back to Kakashi. The Hitaki sighed and pulled out the scroll, splitting the seal and unfurling it with no small measure of trepidation. When he saw the names inside, he blinked in a very great measure of surprise. And started to laugh. Dad! I passed! I'm a genin! Kakashi found himself quite abruptly face down on the ground, cheek mashed into the flower bed to the left of the path between the front gate and the front door of his house. He'd just been coming home, and had been assaulted from behind. Even now he could feel his attacker, hugging him delightedly, weight pressing him down. Good afternoon, Naruto, how was your day? He said, just a hint of a laugh in his voice as he pushed himself up and shoved the boy away, climbing back to his feet. Naruto bounced up, offered a hitai like a trophy. I passed, Dad. Kakashi smiled widely, reaching out and managing to catch his jigging child, holding him close as a rush of pure pride flared through him. Well done, Naruto. I'm proud of you, he said. Naruto squirmed in his arms, too excited to stay still for a hug. I passed. Well, there is that test thing I still have to do with the Jounin-sensei, but I passed, and I graduated, and I'm early, which is so cool, and Iruka-sensei said I could take the test and graduate with my class, and I'm so excited. And why don't you tell me all about it over some celebratory ramen? Kakashi interrupted gently. Naruto beamed at him. Great idea, Dad. Let's go. It was dark and quiet in the Uchiha end of town. Owl shivered as he walked softly past the taped-off Uchiha complex, the empty houses seeming to mock him as he hurried to escape the memories they represented. He soon reached the apartment inhabited by the surviving Uchiha and hesitated. Owl wasn't on duty. He wasn't even supposed to be out of Anbu HQ, and he'd be in a lot of trouble if it was discovered that he'd decided to go for an unauthorized wander around town. But he'd been away on a mission, and hadn't been around to check up on things lately, and he was a little worried. Some people in town were isolated, and didn't know how to look after themselves. Pausing outside Uchiha Sasuke's window, Owl took a moment to listen. No movement, and the light was out. There was only one trap on the window, and the ANBU made short work of it before easing up the glass and sliding inside, a shadow just a shade darker than the ones around it. Inside, he paused again, listening to the sound of Sasuke's even breaths. He was in the Uchiha's bedroom, and it was obvious that the boy was fast asleep. His eyes adjusted quickly to the gloom, and Owl picked his way forwards, stopping to look down at the sleeping child. He looked all right, He was plumping out, obviously eating right again, and his young muscles were showing early stages of definition. His skin and hair looked healthy enough, and textbooks strewn around the bed indicated late-night study sessions were taking place. Not sick, eating enough, training right. All good things, all reassuring to the Anbu. Absently, he petted Sasuke's dark hair, adding just a touch of chakra to the motion to induce good dreams, before sliding away towards the heart of the apartment. In the kitchen he rustled around, checking expiration dates and the general state of things. He poured a little rice he'd brought with him into the mostly empty bag on Sasuke's counter and added tea to the canister behind the kettle. The milk in the fridge was expiring in 2 days' time, so he replaced that with a fresher bottle and changed out some sad-looking fruit with some newer, fresher pieces. Then he moved to the bathroom and made sure the Uchiha heir had enough soap and toilet paper, and cleaned a few spots where the mold looked like it was about to become sentient. Sasuke's house had the look of one whose owner obviously tried to keep it clean, but had no practical knowledge when it came to proper housework. Owls silently wiped dust away from window panes, fans and drapes to keep it from eating the paint away, and returned to the bedroom, satisfied. Sasuke was still sleeping, so Owl let himself out as invisibly as he'd entered, resetting the trap on the way out and improving it a fraction. He took off at a run to get back in his bunk before anyone missed him, and added the previous 10 minutes to the growing pile of memories not to be examined, spoken of or admitted to ever again. Still, inside, deep where he was sure no one would ever find the thought, Owl was glad. He's doing okay. Naruto was leaning against the desk, slumped forwards, his arms crossed and his chin resting in the convenient pillow that made the picture of bored dissatisfaction. He'd arrived late, made tardy by the fact that his father had wanted to get him fitted for a new set of training weights before school that morning, and then had overslept. The result was that Naruto was a good hour late for his last school day and the assignment of his genin team, but he did have a shiny new set of weights wrapped in brown paper that he'd left with his father. Naruto knew for a fact that his father only needed around 6 hours of sleep a night, for, if he was on what Kakashi jokingly dubbed survival rations. Naruto also knew that his father had been in bed, and sleeping, by 10 o'clock last night. This made for an interesting question regarding the reason the man had been simply unable to drag himself from his bed until well after 8 the following day. The 10-year-old was beginning to think that the silver-haired man was beginning to enjoy being chronically late just a little too much, and had started doing, or overdoing, it on purpose. In any event, when Naruto had finally crept into his classroom, Iruka-sensei had been angry and shouted at him, and worse, far worse, the only empty seat was next to Yamanaka Ino. Ino was beautiful, and Naruto had known her for almost as long as he could remember. Inoichi-san's daughter, she turned up at birthday parties and New Year gatherings where Naruto was also in attendance. The problem was that she was a fangirl, and fixated on Sasuke like nothing else. And she'd apparently missed the memo that he was no longer 5, so, when she noticed his existence, she was so condescending it almost made the Hataki's head explode. At that exact moment, Ino was too preoccupied making eyes at the back of Sasuke's head to notice her young classmate slide into the seat beside her, which suited Naruto just fine. The boy settled himself and focused on his teacher. Iruka-sensei was reading out the team assignments slowly, with the air of listen carefully because I am only saying this once. As several civilian-born students got grouped off in a predictable pattern, Naruto wondered vaguely who he'd be pushed with, toying with a half-hearted hope that he'd be teamed up with Kiba, Chuji, Shikamaru or Shino. Squad 7, Hataki Naruto, Iruka-sensei read out, and Naruto's head came up, mind racing to try and guess who else was on his squad. The list would be alphabetical, so that cut out everyone on the register above him, as well as all the ones who'd been assigned teams already. Hareno Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke, Iruka-sensei finished, and Naruto groaned bodily. The chief bastard himself and a civilian-born fangirl. That was a wonderful mix. Sasuke had half-turned to glare, and Naruto glared right back. The older boy had managed to steal top place in the class from him, and Naruto hated him for it. He especially hated the mockery that had resulted once the final results had been published. Naruto was only second by 3 points, anyway, but it was 3 points that Sasuke was determined to lord over him. Sensei, the Hataki said, interrupting his teacher. Why do I have to be on a squad with Sasuke? I thought you were smarter than that. Iruka frowned warningly at him. This year the Hokage decided that, as you are graduating 2 full years prematurely, you will be placed with the 2 top students in the class. Sasuke-kun was the highest ranked student in this class, and Sakura-kun was only a point less than you, so you were grouped together. Now Squad 8. But Sensei, Naruto protested. Surely it's better to design a squad where we actually tolerate one another? Sasuke and I will tear each other apart. Iruka shrugged, the image of couldn't care less. If you want to graduate today, Naruto-kun, this is the squad you have been assigned. You may, if you choose, stay another year in the academy and be grouped with students from Akemi-sensei's class. Naruto ground his teeth, seriously considering the pros and cons of staying behind, but grinned his support as Kiba whooped excitedly a few seconds later when his name was called and the raging temptation died down. He'd deal with the squad, for now at least. He laid his head back on his arms and settled in to wait. Their teacher was late. They were the only ones in the classroom, and had been for a good half hour. Uncomfortable silence had settled over them like a thick blanket, leaving the 3 children still and quiet in the room. Finally, Naruto jerked his head up and blinked owlishly at the door, frowning absently. What? He murmured. The others each glanced at him, then individually dismissed the noise. A moment later, the door slid open and a tall man stepped inside. Sasuke sat up straighter, guessing this man to be their instructor. He didn't look anything special, but the brat had an expression on his face that hinted he'd known this person was coming, and yet was still stunned. Sasuke scowled. How had the kid known? And what was so shocking about this particular jounin? What are you doing here? Naruto demanded before the man could talk. The skin around the newcomer's eyes crinkled as if he was smiling, but nothing else changed. I'm your jounin instructor, he said brightly. Naruto stood and slammed his hands down on the desk, leaning forwards. There is only so long you can stalk me, you weirdo, he said stoutly. The man who was apparently their teacher didn't falter in his smile, but gave a little laugh, as if the words had been a joke. Maybe they had been. Heaven knew Naruto brat was a weird child. Well, we'll see, he said lightly. Meet me up on the roof, kids. Naruto scowled as the man vanished in a twist of smoke. For a second it looked as if he were about to make an exclamation of some kind, narrate the reason for his surprise to the world, but the moment passed, and he swung his feet to the side and stood without speaking. Glancing back at his teammates when they stared at him, unmoving, he said meet on the roof, didn't he? Come on, then. He was gone before they could start glaring again, indignant at the idea of being ordered around by a child. A few minutes later saw the 4 of them sitting on the rooftop, Naruto scowling at his so-claimed stalker with an expression that was almost a pout while Sasuke, a little uncertain about the situation, eyed the man who was meant to be their teacher warily. Sakura seemed unconcerned, though Sasuke admitted to himself that it was hard to tell, with the fangirls swooning over whatever it was this time, and paying no attention to their situation whatsoever. Well, I guess this is everyone, the man said. Naruto's glare intensified by a factor of 2.3 and was studiously ignored. So, what say you guys introduce yourselves? There was a heartbeat or 2 of killer intent-stricken silence before he continued, pointing at Naruto, you can start us off. Naruto's lower lip pushed out into a real pout, and he narrowed his eyes at the man like he'd been betrayed. Public speaking? And you started with me? I guess everyone here knows that my name is Hatake Naruto. I am a dog person, not a cat person. I live with my father. I don't have a mother. I have a problem with Kumo, bees, annoying bastards who treat me like a little kid, and, newly added, jounin who apparently make it their goal in life to stalk me through every stage of it, regardless of how much mocking from classmates that may mean I have to endure. Cue significant look at their teacher. The man was superbly unaffected. Naruto scowled. I like ramen, the pack, and tempura. In fact, tonight, I'm going to demand tempura for dinner. Dad promised me whatever I like, to celebrate making genin, and I'm going to make sure he eats with me. So there. Sakura didn't seem to react beyond a patronizing glance at the little one. Strike one, Naruto thought grimly, Sasuke spared him a disdainful snort. Their teacher winced imperceptibly, before nodding at Sakura. Okay, Pinky, you're up next. Oh. The girl jumped a little, startled out of her Sasuke watching and blinking like a deer caught in headlights. My name is Haruno Sakura. I like, she paused, glancing sideways. My hobbies. Another sidelong glance, followed by a giggle and a rather impressive blush. It hadn't escaped Naruto's notice that she hadn't answered the first question yet either. My dreams for the future. The high-pitched squeal would have ruptured eardrums if Naruto hadn't been expecting it, having heard a similar conversation before. He thought Sasuke had winced, and the Jounin-sensei was rubbing at the corner of his jaw somewhat painfully. I hate Pig. That seemed to be the end of her speech. Their teacher said, nodding at Sasuke. Our broody team member, then. Sasuke grunted. Naruto rolled his eyes and shifted, the easygoing kid unaccountably annoyed with the entire situation. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. My likes and dislikes are none of your business. I have no hobbies. I have no dream, it is an ambition. One day I will kill a certain someone. The aura of doom he'd been building up abruptly came crashing down around them as Naruto sighed and grumbled, Drama Queen. Sasuke shot him an acidic death glare that would have stripped bark off trees, while Naruto remained unmoved. Briefly, Sasuke wondered what it was about this Jounin that irritated the blonde, but dismissed the question. Yes, well, the adult said. Moving on. So, tomorrow we're going to have our first survival exercise. I expect you all there bright and early, training ground 22. Sensei, why are we doing survival exercises? Sakura demanded. We've already done them in the academy. A suspicious glint entered her emerald eyes and she shot Naruto a glare. This isn't because of him, is it? She demanded nastily. What was the point of letting the kid graduating if he can't handle missions? Sasuke glowered, pinning the Jounin with his dark gaze. I refuse to be held back by some baby, he stated darkly. Naruto cut off their teacher's reply with a scoff. Relax, guys. It's not my fault, he said, looking directly at Sakura. This is just the second genin test. Yes, we've passed the academy test, but our teacher, he said the word with delicately, as if it held greater meaning, has to agree that we are skilled enough to warrant teaching. How would you know that? Sakura said dismissively. You're just a little kid. Naruto gritted his teeth against the accusation. I've watched my dad test a few teams, he said simply, carefully level. Every year he gets one. Hasn't passed one yet. Anyway, I know about this extra test, and before you demand to know why I didn't tell you, you never asked. In fact, you never speak to me, so don't get all titchy that I haven't bared my heart and soul to you in the past. The blonde paused for a moment, and then added as an afterthought, and I'm not a baby. Yes, well, now that we've cleared that up, the teacher stepped in before anyone could explode. Why don't you three toddle off home? Get a good night's rest. Oh, and don't eat breakfast tomorrow, unless you enjoy tasting it twice. Off you go, now! With multiple glares at their teacher's sunny smiles, Sakura and Sasuke both stood and left without further comment. Naruto stood up but didn't make to leave, instead staring down the man who was watching him with some amusement. There was a moment's silence, before the Jounin sighed. Tempura? Really, Naruto, your poor father? His least favorite food? Naruto stood still, arms crossed over his chest and scowl firmly in place, directed at his new teacher. A lazy eyebrow rose in silent confusion, and the 10-year-old growled, Why didn't you tell me? His teacher's face was shinobi blank. Oh, so you're that Hatake Naruto, then? I didn't realize. I've heard so much about you. Dad, shut up. Hatake Kakashi grinned. That's it for part 5. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.